Hello, good morning, and welcome to MarTech 21. If you've just joined us, or welcome back if you were here for the first session. In this second session, we're going to run 30-minute breakout sessions across 3 parallel streams. You can move between the streams and attend 3 options live. The remaining breakouts will be available on demand after this virtual conference is over with. So our first speaker here in stream 1 is Kathryn Strachan from Copyhouse. And the title of her talk is Content Optimization, why SEO search intent matters more than ever. By the end of this, I hope to understand what that means. Kathryn, over to you.
Great, thank you. Thank you for the introduction. It's lovely to see everyone today. So yes, I am Kathryn Strachan. I am Managing Director at Copyhouse. Copyhouse is a content marketing agency specializing in technology and fintech content. So we work with fintech brands like Klarna, as well as clients in the tech space who do biometric technology. Yes, and SEO is a part of everything we do. So today I'm going to be talking about why SEO search matters more now than ever before. And within that, talking about customer intent and how you can understand and create content that your audience actually wants to engage with. Great, so let's get started. So in order to kind of set the scene, one of the first things I want to talk about is Bert. So you may have heard about Bert, but Bert is essentially a natural language processor that helps Google better understand search intent and evaluate content. So Bert actually isn't very new because it's been around for about a year now. So it was originally launched in October, at the end of October last year, and then rolled out across more platforms towards the end of the year. So by platforms, I mean more of Google's domain. So it started with the US English site and then rolled out to more of Google's platforms. So Bert is really interesting, and I'm not going to go into it fully today, but essentially what you need to know, especially for my talk, is that Bert helps Google better understand what people want. So it does that by evaluating the content, understanding what people are looking for to the degree that you can mask words. So you can have a sentence and you can take a word out of that sentence, and it evaluates what comes before and what comes after to identify what that masked word is. There's a really great video that Moz does if you're interested in learning more about Bert. But what's important to take from this today is that Bert kind of flips the script a little bit. So rather than being SEO for robots, lots of SEO tricks and tips, SEO kind of, Bert takes it and makes it more human. So Bert understands what people want and how you can deliver that. So because Bert is based on natural language processing, you can't actually optimize for Bert. Instead, you need to focus on delivering quality content that connects with users. So Bert helps Google better understand what people want and then better understand the content that's going to fulfill that purpose. So when you're thinking about optimizing for Bert and when you're thinking about creating digital content, you want to start by thinking about search intent. So it's really important to understand the kind of content people want when they use certain keywords. What is it that they're looking for? What's going to answer their question? And how can you deliver content that aligns with that? So this requires understanding your audience and how they use certain words or terms to search the internet. So search intent is really important for creating SEO content, especially in today's modern world, especially with Bert. So when you're thinking about search intent and you're doing your keyword research, you want to think about and answer questions like, what are users actually looking for when they use that term? What does your product or service actually do? So you don't want to go after a keyword that isn't well aligned, that doesn't match, what you do. And does a potential keyword accurately describe your product or service? So again, it would make no sense to optimize your content or your landing page for a term that does not meet what you do, because then you would be misleading people. The search intent wouldn't be there, and neither would the relevancy. So in order to understand search intent, you first have to understand your audience. And understanding your audience has some really meaningful impacts when it comes to creating content. So Coffeehouse, we create a lot of content. It's actually, Coffeehouse grew out of my freelance copywriting business. So I come at this from a very content-focused perspective. And in today's world where, people are creating so much content, pushing out so much content, it's really important to take a moment and to step back and to think about your audience. And research, backs this up. So 72% of consumers say that they only engage with personalized messaging, which makes sense, because why would you engage with messaging that wasn't for you, that didn't sound like it was for you, it didn't sound relevant? Research also shows that 70% of consumers say that a company understanding how they use products and services is very important to winning their business. So that's from Salesforce. And it is definitely true. So when I start to create content, before I even create a SEO strategy, I start by looking at who they want to reach and building out customer avatars. So customer avatars, for those of you who don't know, it essentially sets out, who you want to work with, who are they, both at a surface level. So, where are they from? What's their occupation? Are they married? Do they have kids? As well as the more deeper, darker psychological elements about them. But essentially, your customer avatar should cover everything essential about your target audience. And it's very likely that you're going to have more than one customer avatar. So by understanding your audience and by having customer avatars, you can create laser sharp messaging. So this is a messaging that, is personalized, that connects with your audience. It helps you understand the ideas and topics your audience wants, which should then fuel your SEO strategy so that you can make sure that search intent is aligned. It allows you to align with their core beliefs to show that you understand them, that you know who they are, you know what they struggle with, and that you can help them solve those problems, which then relates to delivering valuable, meaningful, and personalized content. So when you're creating an SEO strategy, and on my last point around creating quality content, while Google is, not great at telling you exactly what it wants and how its algorithm determines what quality content is, they have released these 3 golden keys that they use for differentiating high versus low quality content. So I want to talk through them quickly with you today. So the first is around beneficial purpose. So this is, again, line to search intent. It's about not misleading people, not tricking them, not being overly salesy, actually trying to help them, which comes back to, what I was talking about a little bit earlier with understanding somebody's pain points and how you can help alleviate them. They also have your money or your life content, or content that they identify as money or your life, which follows slightly different rules and, is a bit more stricter around. And then this principle of EAT, so expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. So beneficial purpose could also be seen as search intent. So beneficial purpose is about making sure that your content has a beneficial purpose, that it's going to help people, that it's going to give them the information that they want, and that they expect when they visit your page. So it's not misleading. It's not, overly spammy or salesy. Instead, good content should help people and be user-centric. So sharing information on a topic, educating people about something that they want to know about, and are quite often using a long tail keyword to find information on. That's expressing a viewpoint or answering a common question. And of course, you are going to have landing pages that sell, but it shouldn't be, misleading to drive that sale. Within that, they also have your money or your life. So your money or your life applies to content that, if it was incorrect or inaccurate, could have a massive impact on somebody's life or their money. So with this type of content, it's very important that it contains the highest level of EAT, which we'll talk about in a moment. But if you're creating content that is going to help somebody make a decision about their life, about laws, about their finances, about their health and safety, it's very important that you have the expertise and the authoritativeness to be able to talk about this subject in a way that's going to help somebody. So EAT applies to some degree to all content. So for content that is not your money or your life, you can be an expert, an everyday expert is what they call it, where you have everyday expertise and can confidently talk about, say, the latest restaurants. But when it comes to your money or your life content, this should really be written by somebody who has credentials, or at least backed up and confirmed and verified by them. But the standard of expertise required kind of depends on the topic of the page and what you're writing about. Within EAT, you also have authoritativeness. So that's about the content creator, the content itself, and the website. So this is when a brand, is seen as an industry leader, produces quite a lot of good quality information and thought leadershipness. And then the third element to this is trustworthiness. So that takes into the account the content creator, the content itself, and website, but then also considers if the information is accurate and up to date. So you don't want to use out-of-date stats. You want to make sure that any of the research that you're including in your article and your content is as up to date as it possibly can be, and that it's accurate, and that, again, it comes back to this beneficial content, that you're not misleading anybody by giving them, say, an old fact from early 2000s, but that it's relevant, up-to-date information that is going to help somebody make a decision on, whatever it is that they're reading about. So I want to quickly, talk about some of the ways that you can create a content strategy for Bert. Now that we understand, the wider context, we've touched on what Bert is and how that influences search intent, and then, how that influences quality content as well. I want to talk about some of the ways that you can go about creating a content strategy that takes Bert into consideration. So the first step is really to create customer avatar. So as I talked about earlier, your customer avatar is a profile, it's persona of the person that you want to work with, of the person who's going to be sitting on the other side of that screen, reading and engaging with your content. So it's important to understand who they are and what they care about. And this is going to help you connect with them. So I always use this example that it's like being in a room of 1,000 people and saying, hey, everyone, come listen to me. It's going to fall on deaf ears. Nobody's going to listen to you. But if you say, hey, guy in the blue shirt, all the guys wearing blue shirts are going to turn around and look at you. And that is how you create content that cuts through that noise, that competes against all the content that's out there, and that connects with your audience in a way that they're going to understand and respond to. So I want to talk briefly about what customer avatars might include. So at a top level, it's going to be age, gender, position, goals, pain points, income, education. You might also explore where they already spend their time online and how you can kind of get in front of them on a channel, on a platform that they already engage with. The next step is to go a little bit deeper. So once you kind of have those surface level characteristics, and once you've painted the picture, you go a little bit deeper and you look at some of the psychological elements behind who they are. So what do they secretly fear may be true about their life? What keeps them up at night? Where will they lose power or influence if things don't change? So this is building out the pain point. And the pain point is really useful because it helps position you and your company as a headache reliever. So say you have a headache, you're going to take an Advil or Tylenol, you're going to take a pain reliever that day. You're not going to wait until, next month or next budget review. You're going to take it immediately. And that creates a sense of urgency around your product and your service. And also when this comes to SEO, when you're looking at search intent, people are going to be looking for questions around their problem, around what they're dealing with, around how they can fix it, how they can solve it. Because I can guarantee you that, when you have a problem, probably the first place you go for research and information on how to solve that problem is Google. You're going to go to Google and you're going to, type in how to help a baby go to sleep, or, something like that. And whatever it is that you're struggling with, you're going to Google to get the information that you need to solve that problem. So imagine if you could leverage that so that your brand could be there and you could be there with the answer. Not only are your prospects going to feel immediately supported, but they're going to start to build a relationship with you. And that's really powerful. And one of the beautiful things about Bert is that it kind of helps you do that by understanding what people want and understanding how people use language, and how you can, if you understand how it works, how you can align with it so that you can deliver the answer to the questions that they're looking for, and the answers to the questions that they're looking for that are going to solve their problem. So my next tip is to make sure that your content strategy is aligned with search intent. So once you have a profile of your customer, you can then start to think about, how do they use Google? So what are they searching on Google? And what within that, like, what is their level of understanding of the topic and industry that they're searching? So when you do your keyword research, if you are targeting somebody who has a very in-depth level in blockchain, an article on what is blockchain is probably not going to be suitable. You might also look at what information would somebody want or expect if they use a certain term. Well, you should actually definitely, not maybe, you should definitely, consider that. So when I do keyword research, not only am I looking at like the hard numbers, like search volume and keyword difficulty, but I'm also thinking about what people mean and what they want when they use a certain term. And that's going to help you make sure that you choose keywords that are relevant, and by being relevant, are aligned with search intent. And then my third tip that I'm kind of going to leave you on today is, what sort of information do they want to know before speaking to somebody in your sales team? So creating meaningful content is about understanding somebody's psychological being before they contact you. It's about understanding the common questions that they're going to be asking, because I can almost guarantee you that if they're asking your sales team these questions, they're going to be asking, there are plenty of people out there who are thinking them, but are not asking. There are plenty of people out there, it's almost tip of the iceberg, the people who are actually asking your sales team, because there's going to be plenty of people out there who are thinking these things, but don't have time to reach out, don't have time to, ask, don't want to ask, maybe feel that it's a stupid question. So thinking about, what kind of questions does your sales team hear? How could content help solve your customer avatar's problems that we talked about a little bit earlier? What information would make their lives easier today? And then making sure that, whether you're creating landing pages or, long form content, that these are things that you kind of always keep in mind and that you're always aware of. So once you have all these insights and once you have all this information, you can turn it into a content calendar. So, your content calendar is maybe going to include an H1 and an article title, target keywords. So these keywords should be firmly aligned both with your audience as well as, striking the right data points. You want to include an article synopsis, the target audience that you identified earlier, a content pillar if you're going to be using the content pillar method, awareness stage. And this essentially is just a framework for capturing all the information so that you could, pick it up and run with it. It doesn't have to be done by you. It could be done by somebody in your team, but it keeps everybody on the same page and gives you a framework to work from. So if you are ever unable to not, go to work, to not create content, that somebody else could pick this up and would know, all this work that you've done, all this work that I've talked you through today, and be able to run with it. So before I sign off, I want to point you towards our ebook that we recently created. So our ebook is on how tech companies can harness content marketing to connect with their target audience. So this explores further some of the things that I was talking about today. the link's here. Please download and read it. And I hope you really enjoy it.
Kathryn, thank you very much for that. We have got some questions that have come in already, so I'll just go through them sequentially. First question is from Andrew Girdwood from Leith, saying, what do you think is more critical in copy, staying authentic and true to your unique brand voice, or having content that uses the language customers currently use, as the two aren't always the same?
Well, in my opinion, the two should be very firmly aligned. So when I create a, tone of voice, when I create a tone of voice for a client, your tone of voice represents you, but who you are should also reflect and connect with your audience. If they don't, then you're possibly going after the wrong audience. So say, for example, a young startup fintech that's geared at millennials, and then, that's not going to connect with an older generation. So their tone of voice is going to be very hip. It's going to use lots of slang. It's going to be very funky. And that might not connect with an older generation. So their older generation, like if that was actually their target audience, if that was actually who they wanted to work with, then they should probably not be using, lots of slang and being very playful and, taking the piss out of finances, perhaps. So, your tone of voice and who you are as a brand should always align, at least to some element, with who you want to reach. Otherwise, that relationship isn't going to work, because content actually is not just about putting pen on paper. It's about creating conversations and creating conversations with the people that you want to work with. So if you're not talking to them in a way that they understand, that they relate to, that they engage with, then that relationship probably isn't going to go very far.
Okay, interesting. This question from Aravind, American Express, says, Bert in many ways is just the start of the next level of language models. He references a few others, and a new one launched by Google recently in 2021, substantially bigger and better than Bert. From this future perspective, what changes do you anticipate, and what best practices do you advocate?
Yeah. Well, I think, one of the reasons why people have been so excited about Bert was not because it was a be-all, end-all, but because it was a marked difference, a noticeable shift in how Google understood and related to content. So, there might have been a day a long time ago when, keyword stuffing would have gotten you a page one spot on Google. And today, as Google's gotten smarter and smarter and smarter, it's become harder and harder and harder to get away with things like that, because Google has become more and more focused on its audience, on the people who are using it. So Bert is only a step in that direction. But I believe and I think that, as we continue to go forward and as Google continues to get smarter and roll out better and better technology, that balance is only going to continue. So, SEO content that's written for machine is going to, fall by the wayside. And instead, content is going to be written for the people who are actually reading it, who are actually engaging with it. And Google will get better at being able to identify that content, which is why, what I was talking about today with understanding your audience, with understanding your customer avatars and using that to influence search intent is so important.
Have you ever encountered a job being confronted by, information you thought, actually, no, this just doesn't make any sense at all. This company doesn't understand themselves what it is they're trying to do?
Yeah, all the time, because we specialize in tech content, and most tech content, especially in the early days, will be written by developers. So it'll be written essentially for themselves. So it'll be full of jargon. It'll be very dry and dull and boring and heavily focused on features of what it does, when their target audience actually doesn't care what it does. What it cares about is, does it solve my problem? Is it going to make my life easier? And the end customer often gets pushed aside in that conversation. And when brands create content in-house, especially when it's created not by marketers or not by people who understand copywriting, but by developers, it gets very, like they're writing for themselves, but they're not selling to themselves. They're selling to an audience who doesn't understand it to the same degree they do. So, one of the ways I explain Coffeehouse's value is that we act as a bridge. So we connect brands with their target audience by taking those really in-depth insights, that really technical mumbo jumbo, and translating into content that their readers, that their audience understands and enjoys engaging with, and makes them want to, work with them, essentially.
Is that a two-way explanation? By that I mean, yes, you can explain it to the potential consumer, but is it also a moment of enlightenment for the product?
Yes. So we run content marketing workshops that often get called like brand therapy, because I'm pushing people and asking them, like, why is that way? Like, explain that to me, like pushing them to dig deeper and deeper and deeper into these things that they have maybe held as mantras or held as sayings within the company without ever questioning. And quite often it happens that, like, a founder sets up a business and, nobody ever challenges them or asks them to think deeper about what they're saying and why that is going to matter to their customer audience. So we actually, we run content marketing messaging workshops to push and challenge brands on their messaging. And that often reveals things that need to change or need to be different. And then we create a brand book that kind of captures their new messaging. So yeah, we help them create messaging that better reflects who they are and who they want to be and who their audience, wants them to be.
Has any client ever just dug their heels in and gone, no, we don't want to be that? That's your interpretation of what you think we're doing, but actually we're not happy with that.
Well, it's always a conversation, and I'm very persuasive. So most of the time I can, convince them, but it's not necessarily like my way or the highway. It's kind of a back and forth, a conversation. If somebody said that to me, I'd say, well, why? Like, explain that to me. Why do you think that? And, dig into it. And, they might be right in a way. There might be something that they're really protective over that's really special to their brand. And by asking why and digging deep, you can kind of pull that out, and then you can incorporate that. So, it's definitely not my way or the highway, but do tend to be very persuasive. So I can normally find, a middle ground, or at least understand the actual reasons. People who are like, no, I definitely don't want to change. I definitely don't want to do X, Y, Z, tend not to be people who want to do the workshop in the first place, and tend not to want to be people who want to work with us because they often think that they can write content better.
It's a very telling laugh at the end of that. Question here from Alison Richards, Progressive TSL, saying, would customer avatars be relevant to B2B marketing? Can you provide examples? Yeah,
always. Most of our work, 85, perhaps even more, 90% of our work is B2B. What gets forgotten in B2B is that it's business to business, but you're still selling to a individual. So there's still a person reading that content, engaging with that content. So you're going to have a point of contact within an organization. And within B2B, it's even more important, because not only do you have to understand that point of contact, you have to understand who's going to influence their decisions. So the information that you need to deliver to the first point of contact might be and will probably be very different to the person who's going to hold the budget strings, who's going to make the final sign off. And in B2B, one of the worst things that happens in B2B content marketing is that people forget that they're talking to people and start writing in really corporate, very stale, very dry, like language that almost nobody wants to read. How I explain, B2B to B2C, B2B is still human. They're just a human at work rather than a human at the pub or in their leisure time. So you still want to understand those psychological motivations. And most of the time, the things that people are awake at 2 a.m. worried about are things that related to their work. They're worried about their next review. They're worried about something that's gone wrong in a project. Most people, perhaps they have personal things that occasionally keep them up at night, but I would guarantee you that most people are awake at night worried about something related to their work.
Yeah. Kathryn, that's been absolutely fascinating. Thank you very much for your time this morning.
No problem. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Good.
Lovely. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Good. That was Kathryn Strachan, the Managing Director of Copyhouse. Now, moving on to our next contributors, I'm actually going to tell you about what's going to be happening in the other two streams, not the one that I'm sitting here in front of at the moment. Breakout E is Facebook measurement and analytics with, I think, Lena Poca. That's the marketing consultant and business trainer of Facebook. Breakout F is marketing evolution, connecting technology to customer needs. And that's with Hans Mans, founder of Smans Marketing Consultancy. But our next speaker here in stream 1 is Craig Campbell, who's SEO consultant and trainer. And he's going to be talking about auditing your website for SEO. So, Craig, over to you.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I am just going to move over to the slides now. Right, so see them there. So my name's Craig Campbell. I'm based in Scotland. It's the first event I've never actually had to apologise for my accent. But I do affiliate marketing, I do SEO consultancy, and I normally buy and sell websites to make money. That's pretty much how I make money. But today I'm going to be talking about auditing your website for SEO, because regardless of whether we do affiliate marketing, business to business, whatever, you still have to audit a website and understand what that means and the different parts of auditing that come into play, because there's so much that Google are looking for from a website. You can't just do a blanket audit to a website. You can do a link audit. You can do a whole bunch of other types of audits, such as site speed, content auditing, technical SEO audit. So I'm going to talk a bit about some of that stuff because it's hugely important. Your website is your shop window, and especially obviously with COVID and everything else, online is really, really important to a lot of businesses. So I'm going to show you some of the tools we use for auditing a website and the reason we are using those tools and what these tools do to help you guys better understand what an SEO would do, and maybe you can even go on and do it yourself. So some of the tools that we would use would be the likes of SEMrush, GTmetrix, Sitebulb, Screaming Frog, Google Page Speed Insights, Pingdom. But I'm going to start off with SEMrush. It's the first tool I get, and the first thing that happens when a client comes to me is I'll run their website through SEMrush. It's a great auditing tool, and it gives you a score, which you can see on the dashboard there. Now, you can audit a lot of different stuff on the website there, like the backlink and everything else, but this is just an overview of your website to see what kind of condition it's in, what underlying problems the website's got, and so on. So typically on a SEMrush site audit, you have errors, which are issues that need addressed urgently, warnings, which are things that are potentially going to harm your digital marketing campaign, and notices. Now, notices tends to be a lot higher. These tend to be things like your page, you're blocking that page from the robots, and you might be doing that for a reason. So that's just more notifying you of things that haven't on your website, and you can quickly look at them and understand whether that you have to fix those problems. So typically, when you go through a site audit, you'll be able to see, it will tell you X amount of pages have got, a slow loading speed, X amount of pages have this, that, or the next thing, and you can see a list of some of the problems that may be on there. Now, that was my own website I used in this example, and typically, I would work through that list, and you can also, if you outsource or work with a team or whatever you might do, you can also send this stuff direct to Trello using SEMrush. So if, for example, I've got 20 pages that have a slow loading speed, I can send that to Trello, to my developer, and get him to look at why that's loading slowly. But that's basically a quick overview of that. Now, you can basically go into some of the warnings as well, and it will tell you that 2 pages don't have a header 1 tag, or, X amount of images have not been tagged up properly and stuff like that. Now, these are all very, very small things that when you're doing your SEO, they're quite important to do, because if you don't do them, you're not doing SEO properly. So you want to optimize your images. You want to make sure you've got header tags on each of your pages and so on. So by doing this audit, you can very quickly understand whether your SEO is actually being done properly or not. And again, the notices part of this will show you things like, you've got X amount of pages that that are blocked from the kind of search engines. You've got X amount of redirects, you've got X amount of this, that, and the next thing. You can see a whole bunch of problems on there, or potential problems that are on there, again, that you could either go and deal with yourself or send to Trello and get that job moving through the process. Now, that's SEMrush doing a quick overview of a website. Now, another thing that's really important is the speed of your website. Now, people say, oh, is it hugely important? I wouldn't recommend that you obsess over speed when it comes to a website, but I'm sure we've all been in that position where if you go on a website and it's kind of slow loading and you're trying to buy something, you end up buggering off and you go to another website. So GTmetrix is a great tool for analysing your website speed. And you can see here, that gives my website an A grade, which is the top grade. Gives me the performance scores. But what it also does is give me things that are able to be improved. Now, this, if you run your website through it, which is completely free, will give you the answers to why your website's loading so slow. So if that's big images, or you've not minified some CSS, or whatever the problem might be with your website, this will tell you what that problem is. And you can obviously shave off type your website's loading time to make sure that it does load in probably under 2 seconds. Now, before I go any further, I do want to highlight that you don't have to become obsessed by making your website load from 1.7 seconds to 1.5 seconds. You don't have to strip out important functions or features of your website to make sure it gets loading under a second. That's madness. And a lot of people do become obsessed with site speed. I think anything that loads in under 2 seconds is reasonable, so don't become too obsessed with it. Now, when I'm doing a site speed audit, I tend to use Pingdom as well, which is very similar to GTmetrix, and again, gives you ideas on how you can improve. Now, the reason I'm using 2 of these tools is we're using off-the-shelf tools that are completely free, and sometimes, the tool could be running slow or whatever. So I like to use 2 tools just as in comparison to give me a rough idea of whether my website's loading slow or not. And 9 times out of 10, they'll give you very similar scores, but I like to always get a comparison with that. So that can, these 2 tools are great for site speed and allows you to optimize your website to try and get some reasonable speed on there to your website. You can, if you use WordPress, also use caching plugins like WP Rocket or something similar. And again, that can do a lot of this stuff for you by simply using a plugin. But other people will be using different platforms, and you probably want to send that work to your developer. So try and get your site speed under 2 seconds. Now, content auditing is another thing when I'm doing an audit that we have to audit. We have to look and see if there's any quality there, if there's any structure to the content that's on there. And obviously, Kathryn was talking about the importance of content previously. And it's so important. The content part of your website really is, the foundation of a great project. And, if you've not got content on there, targeting the right keywords, you are going to fail miserably when it comes to SEO. So content auditing is really important, but it's not a case of scanning it with your eyes. So I use a tool, and there's a number of different tools out there, but my personal choice is Page Optimizer Pro. Now, you've also got the likes of Surfer SEO and Market Muse and various other tools that do the same thing. This is just a personal preference of mine because I've used it for years. Now, what you do here is compare. Now, everyone, when they're doing content, will maybe say to their content writer, right, I need 1,000 words for this article that's going to target this particular search term. Now, who says it's 1,000 words or 500 words or whatever that guide is? Most people are blanket guessing what they're doing there. Now, the right way to do this would be to use a tool like Page Optimizer Pro, which basically scrapes the top 10 search results and then tells you what to do. So it will tell me, for example, in this page, that I have a page that I'm trying to rank for SEO Training Middlesbrough, and it will tell me that on average, everyone else in the top 10 have 1,600 words. I've got 800 words. It also tells me what I could include in my page title. And you'll be able to see there's some green dots there, and there's also a little red dot on there. The red dot is something else that I could be adding to that title. Now, you've also got subheadings on your content as well. And you'll see here, I've got a whole bunch of red dots, and that is giving me other subheadings that the competition are using. Now, I keep referring to the competition. Why do we care about the competition? Well, Google are rewarding these guys with page one rankings for the exact same thing. So we need to either mirror that or do better. So Page Optimizer Pro obviously gives you that. And as I say, gives you subheading ideas, but it also gives you semantically related keywords that you can include in your content. Again, I think Kathryn in the previous talk spoke about Google's natural language processing system, and Google can understand semantically related keywords. Now, by auditing your content and seeing if you can add these semantically related keywords, semantically related subheadings, is the difference between your page ranking for 5 search terms or 500 search terms. Now, if you don't add these semantically related keywords in, Google can never know that you want to rank for all of these kind of search terms. So obviously when you're writing content, all of these things are hugely important. So you have to audit the content as well, because when someone comes to me, they're coming to me to make their website rank better. And they've probably tried someone else who's just launched 500 word articles out there, and they're not digging deeper into what is actually working. So Page Optimizer Pro is something that I use to audit people's content and give me actionable tips to then go and add more content, add more subheadings, add more semantically related keywords to make that website progress. Now, it also gives you related questions, related keywords. It also talks about your competitors' title tags, and it also gives you the page structure, whether people are using images, whether you're using italic words, bold words, whatever. So this, again, is giving you full on-page optimization that allows you to make that client, it's giving you actionable tips to make that client perform better. Now, a link audit, again, is something that you would always want to look at. Now, when it comes to SEO, there's 2 main factors in my opinion anyway, and that's content and links. You can't really rank for something really competitive without both. Now, some content people will argue you can because the content's so good, but the reality is if you're going for anything competitive, you do need those links to support that content to get the top page rankings. Now, link building is a very touchy subject online, as I'm sure many of you already know, and you can actually suffer from bad backlinks. Now, there's so many charlatans in the SEO industry, and so many people just giving garbage links out and stuff like that. And you'll be able to see here, again, I've audited my own backlink profile, and I've got some crazy person that doesn't like me who's sending a whole bunch of Chinese link spam at me. But that could also happen to you, or your SEO company are just not good at link building. Now, SEMrush allows you to analyze these, and it will give you an idea on what links here are toxic. Now, when it comes to toxic, these tools are giving things a toxic score based on the anchor text, the kind of website itself, the words used on the website. And do I want my digital marketing website associated with porn from China? Absolutely not. It's not relevant and could be massively damaging. So doing regular backlink audits to make sure that that stuff is clean and tidy is really important. And again, SEMrush can allow you to do that. Now, going into this, you'll be able to see there's a whole bunch of garbage on there, and SEMrush are giving it a toxicity score of 100, which means urgently get rid of that, disavow that garbage. And basically by disavow, I mean tell Google that these links are not associated with me, and they should ignore them, and that shouldn't cause my website any damage. But you need to scan them, upload that disavow file to make sure that you do not get penalised for that. Now, there are guys out there selling negative SEO, willy-nilly for $25. You could go and buy something from a marketplace like Legit and basically slam someone's website and cause them a whole bunch of problems. Now, that's what's on the market there. You need to be able to understand that and obviously defend against that. And that's where the link audit becomes really important as well, because it's like leaving your house open, your front door open. You're going to do that and let everyone just come in and take what they want? Absolutely not. You need to put up defences against that stuff, and doing regular link audits is important. Now, you'll be able to see the person slamming me with 1 million links a month. Now, I know that person has went to that seller who will sell you 1 million links a month and smash my website. Now, I went to that guy and tried to find out who it is, but you can see very quickly that someone is literally out to get me. So it's really important that I do keep on top of that and clean that stuff up, because 7,300 of these that are pulling through are absolute garbage, toxic links, and that is madness. That's 7 times more than the good links that I've got. So when Google are looking at that, they could potentially be looking at my website saying, this is horrendous, and we need to get that stuff sorted out. So hugely important that you do a backlink audit on a month-to-month basis or quarterly or whatever it might be. Keep on top of that kind of stuff. And you can simply make your disavow file from the back end of WordPress, from the back end of SEMrush, and you pick the links that you decide that are toxic based on the information that SEMrush has given you, and you can move that over to the disavow file and then upload that file to Google and make sure that your website is clean. Now, Sitebulb is another great auditing tool for a website in general. Now, I'm going to explain the reasons why. SEMrush is great at certain things. Every tool is great. It's got its own little unique selling points. But this tool is really, really good. It does a whole bunch of stuff there when it comes to SEO. So when you're auditing your website, you want to also be looking at things like your internal links, and all of the other stuff that's listed here, duplicate content, on page, a whole bunch of other stuff. And this kind of consolidates it all into one Sitebulb. They do a whole bunch of stuff with, also testing if your pages are mobile friendly and everything else. And it really gives you a nice, you can export the PDFs, and it gives you a really nice dashboard that you can simply just give to a client. So when you get a client on board and you audit their website, and it will tell you what the problems are, and you can highlight that to the client. Say, listen, month 1 of your job is going to be cleaning up this website. So here's what needs done. And then obviously after you've done that, you can send them the updated report with all these problems are eradicated. But Sitebulb is a great tool because it can go into duplicate content and check out and basically pull pages in your website that appear to be duplicate content. That is a massive problem because most people will outsource the heavy link building, the heavy lifting when it comes to their website, and part of that heavy lifting is writing content. So a lot of that stuff's outsourced, all over the world, and sometimes these guys are giving out duplicate content or bits of duplicate content or whatever. It does happen. So making sure that you keep on top of that is really important. But it also checks your security of your website as well and tells you what is potentially wrong security-wise for your website, which is also a great little feature. Mobile friendly, of course, I think, I can't even remember the percentages, but it's something like 60% of people are looking at websites on mobile devices in most cases. So you want to make sure that the mobile friendliness of your website's been audited and checked and everything else. My website there has got 98%. There's a couple of little tweaks that I could make, but again, all part of the auditing process. Structured data, featured snippets, trying to get all of that stuff. When it comes to schema, you can also audit that stuff. Indexability score is hugely important. Now, my website doesn't have a great indexability score because half of the garbage on my website, including images and whatnot, have been blocked from indexing because they serve no purpose. So that I know that's right from a SEO point of view, but this also audits that, and you need to understand why your pages are not indexing. You could potentially be adding pages there and they're not indexing for another reason. So again, auditing that stuff's hugely important. So that is just a brief overview of what I would do when I'm auditing a website. It's only 20 minutes long. There's a few other things you can be doing, but I've tried to ram as much as I could in. If you're interested in catching up with me, you can catch my website, CraigCampbellSEO.com. You can find me on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, whatever. And I've got a YouTube channel with a whole bunch of tutorials that are all completely free for you across the whole SEO setup. So that's me for that presentation.
Okay. Craig, thank you very much for that. You're talking about toxic links within websites. What percentage do you think of businesses actually know they've got a problem?
I would probably say 10%. The scary thing is out there, a lot of businesses don't understand SEO that well. And I would also say a lot of SEOs don't understand, people who portray themselves to be SEOs don't understand a lot on the link building side, because it's something that scares them. And, I would say a lot of people have absolutely no clue what's going on with their websites, because every time I get a website, a new customer, they come to me and I'm just like, geez, who's been building these links? What's going on? And they're like, yeah, I've spent X amount of thousands of pounds on this stuff. And you're just like, oh man. And, it's just utter garbage that's out there. So, it's a real high percentage of people who are just getting garbage and they just have no clue. Most business owners, think that these things are all in hand, and it's not until, things don't start progressing that they start to ask questions, and then they go to another SEO guy, they do a quick audit and say, look, this is all garbage, and they're just like, oh. So, yeah, it's very, very high.
You may have already answered the next question. This is from Gillian Nugent, Hymans Robertson. She asks, do you recommend outsourcing SEO, or can smaller organizations or sites do this in-house?
Most people can probably do it in-house. I think the problem you've got there when you outsource it, you're outsourcing it to an agency who are also outsourcing it. And, you're basically paying a middleman who's taking like 80% of your money and maybe spending 20% on content or links or whatever it might be. So I think people should be at least trying to do some of the stuff in-house. I think when it comes to certain things within your website and your business, your business, your product and everything better than anyone else. So why outsource it to some agency where they've got some young member of staff on the minimum wage trying to write about your business and your speciality? It just doesn't come across that well either. And that's where, again, people like Kathryn are specialists in the tech industry when it comes to content writing, and she's found a niche for herself. But you can't just go out to a random copywriter and say, hey man, can you write about steel fabrication or something? The person in that office is not going to have a clue how that works, or the terminology that you would use. So I think you should try and do as much as you can in-house and outsource the certain parts that you just don't have the time to fulfill. So outsource the kind of grunt work, if you like. But I think a lot of the content stuff really has to come from within.
Does the industry need some sort of certification? I mean, almost like a Corgi registered gas fitter, or trusted trader, something along those lines. Would it help?
I think it would help, but it would be really hard to regulate. It's frightening, that there is no regulation to this industry. People are just walking around, oh yeah, I fancy being an SEO, and they start doing it, and there is no qualifications, nothing. And the thing is, Google constantly evolves and changes the goalposts. So what worked 2 years ago might not necessarily work just now. So any certification would be redundant very, very quickly because of the way that Google works and constantly changing things.
You're getting some fan mail in saying, this is great stuff, Craig, thank you so much. And Craig is a rock star. Great session. Alison Richards again, what can we do if we find our content is being duplicated or that we have backlink issues?
I mean, if your content is being duplicated, you need to first find out, who's duplicating it, what is Google seen as the original source of that content. Now, you can do things like takedown requests through DMCA if someone's stolen your content and somehow they're getting the credit for it from Google. But you would need to double check, because if someone copies and pastes your content, it should really harm them more than you. But people are sneaky in this world, and what a lot of people do is when you release content. So, for example, if I want to steal your content and I go to your blog, I can get your blog's RSS feed to ping me the instant that you release a new blog post. Now, I can literally copy and paste that, put it on my website and send it to an indexing tool. And I'll ensure that my website gets seen by Google first by doing that. So therefore, I could literally steal your content and a whole bunch of other people who had no clue what they were doing and steal your content. So you could be writing page after page after page after page, and then you're going, why is my content not ranking? And then you find out some sneaky git down the road there's been stealing it. So, it's like the wild, wild west when it comes to SEO. There is a lot of shady things that go on. So that is, again, why you need to audit that stuff and see who's copying and pasting it, keep an eye on them, and, obviously maybe, ask them to take the content down if they are stealing from you. You can do DMCA takedowns and stuff like that. But yeah, you really have to have your finger on the pulse with that one.
This is maybe a terribly naive question, but if somebody nicks your content like that, and indexes it and claims credit for it, etc., is that actually illegal?
The thing is, it's not illegal to do that. It's just silliness in your part. So, it's it's the thing is with SEO, it's not illegal. Link building's not illegal. Tripping people up or preying on the naive is not illegal as such. I mean, it's immoral. It's not right to do, but it's not illegal. You can't be punished for it in any real way, other than someone telling you to take the content down. So that's the problem you've got in this industry, because a lot of unscrupulous people understand the rules and they bend them to suit themselves and leave vulnerable people who are maybe not as technically gifted or don't understand the game, and just basically violate them. And people are pouring a lot of time and effort into writing good content, and people are stealing it willy-nilly. So it's a crazy world.
Question from Andrea Cochran here, marketing assistant at Stellar, Omada and Shield Hill Castle. Would you use RFs, or would you recommend to use an alternative? She uses RFs to influence the SEO, but it would be great to know if there's a better piece of software to do the job. I mean, Ahrefs is a great tool. It was primarily a backlink tool, so it looks at backlinks and does a whole bunch of other stuff. Now, they do have site audits and they do have other unique selling points, but when it comes to auditing, I would much prefer to use a Sitebulb or a SEMrush, because I think they're better looking and they dig a lot deeper, whereas Ahrefs have got a site auditing part, but they just done it because everyone else has got a site auditing tool, but it's not that good, and the dashboard doesn't look good, and it doesn't dig that deep. Primarily that tool is for backlinks and always has been. Craig, this has been fascinating stuff, and you speak with enormous authority, so thank you very much for your time. No problem at all. Been a pleasure. Thank you very much. Right. Cheers then. Yes. Craig Campbell there, SEO consultant and trainer. Now, there is only one speaker in this next session, essentially, because it's the only live session running. Breakout H, 5 SEO techniques to drive organic traffic with Rebecca Todd, will be available on demand. But our speaker for this next session is Firas Khanessa, Chair of DMA Scotland. Again, this I think is a wonderful sort of overarching title here, The Value of Values. So, Firas.
Thank you very much. It's really great to be here. I wish I was with you in person. I guess we'll get there eventually. So I am... my day job is head of decisioning at Standard Life Aberdeen. I'm also the chair of DMA Scotland. I'm here today in my capacity more as DMA Scotland, really, than head of decisioning at Standard Life Aberdeen. For that, I'm going to be trying to talk to you about something called the value of values, which hopefully is interesting enough from you and enough to keep you away from the lunch that's waiting for you at the other side. For those of you who don't know the DMA is the Data and Marketing Association. They are essentially founded on this notion of having something called the DMA Code, which is the industry best practice for data and marketing practices. So every member that joins the DMA gets audited on the code. The DMA is the largest trade body for data and marketing in Europe. And the one thing that I really love about what the DMA do is actually they really champion the customer, and they're all about the customer and delivering good customer outcomes. And that really sits at the heart of everything that the DMA does. And I encourage you to check out their website, because they do a lot of great work across many different areas. It's not going to be a surprise to anybody here today, but essentially the key thing that the industry is grappling with is trust, and that's really unsurprising given all of the chat that we just heard right now from Craig and the other speakers about some of the behaviors which are being displayed and how those need to be kept in check, but customers are starting to feel more wary. And so one of the responses to that through the DMA is something that we came together in DMA Scotland to call the value of data, which really is about elevating the role of data, and through a firm belief that we think that data has a real role to play in kind of restoring that trust back with customers. And we want to do that from classroom to boardroom. So we want people in schools to be talking about data throughout their careers, and then all the way up to the exec in boardrooms. But in order to realize that data, we have some fundamental challenges that are. Some of them are historical. So, for example, if we wanted to think about what is the value of data, how do we go about putting a pound value against data? And then the first obstacle that you're going to find is that in our modern accounting practices, there is no real place on the balance sheet for data. Data is something intangible. We come from a background, an industrial age, where we really value the tangible. So we could value assets if they are a chair or a table or a computer. But as soon as it becomes a bit more ethereal, then we don't know what to do with that. It just becomes a really tricky environment. But these challenges have not been unsurmounted. Brand had the same issue a few years ago, and now brand is on the balance sheet. So there's no reason why data should not be. Another reason why the value of data is not really appreciated is that our thinking about the creation of value is a bit outdated, in the sense that if we take a look at the industrial age, for example, we take a look at Ford's business model, or you really create an efficient value chain in your production, and you're able to get the product in the market at a good price, and you should be okay. And that's the real kind of levers of the value chain really were inside that factory, or which suppliers you worked with and the materials you kind of had access to. But what's happened now is that this value chain has really exploded, in the sense that we can't look at the value chain in a linear way anymore, because to be honest, in a lot of these interactions that customers and brands have with each other, the value is being created all over, and there isn't a clear way where you could really attribute a value, or where this value is actually being created. But also there are notions which underlie that become even more pertinent. So one of them is, as customers, we are online and we're creating data the whole time. We are online, but we are still treated as if we are just consumers in this value chain. I would argue that and say that as customers, we are value creators and we are producers, actually. So why are we not remunerated on our ability to produce? And I think this is a real paradigm shift that we need to start thinking about, because we're not giving ourselves justice, whether we're posting stuff online or just existing online, really. A lot of companies are making billions out of that, and we are not benefiting from that. There's a really lovely example that I really like, which won, by the way, the DMA has something called the DMA Awards, which is really the gold standard in awards for marketing in the UK. And the winner a couple of years ago was Xbox. And Xbox had a wonderful idea where they kind of started shifting that paradigm a bit. So what Xbox wanted to do was they wanted to create customizable controllers. And now for all of you guys out there, I mean, customization is not anything new to anyone, really. I mean, you could customize your Nike shoe, you could customize anything that you want. So why would anybody be interested in customizing a controller? And so where Xbox were really clever is they basically gave the ability to the users to create their own customized model. But not only that, they were able to kind of patent it. And any model that was sold, designed by one of these users, the creator, the customer, would actually get a chunk of money. Now, it's not an enormous chunk of money, but you could imagine once Xbox unleashed that into the gaming community, and the gaming communities online are huge, they really took off. So people who had millions of followers, on their gaming forums, were able to actually push their controllers, and for every time they sold, the customer got. But what Xbox got out of that is they didn't have to really do the legwork in terms of their marketing. They got the customers to do that, and the customers became business partners to Xbox, which is very clever. And then all the content that they created on the back of that was actually user-generated content. So they took all the controllers, all the stories of the controllers, and then they started surfacing them across platforms. But this is a fundamental shift and a trial to show that these kind of alternative business models do work. If we involve our customers more in our business, that surely is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. Customers are not just, a bunch of people we do stuff to. Which kind of starts getting me a bit into the value of values. And, if we're going to look at value, we can't look at value today without looking at values. Customers have values, and they are becoming much more aware and much more vocal about these values. One recent example is what happened with WhatsApp on the change of the privacy notice. A lot of their subscribers just did a mass walkout because customers are not willing to have wool pulled over their eyes. If they see something that they don't like or it doesn't fit within their value system, then they are going to walk. And this is putting much more pressure back down on brands. And in the media, we're hearing a lot about blunders with data. We had the exam blunder, pandemic related. We've got loads of stuff around COVID. We've come from Cambridge Analytica only a few years ago, and the list goes on and on and on. So customers are becoming far more switched on, and they're coming switched on at a time which is really actually quite critical, because we're seeing mass use of AI. And again, I'm not a doomsday guy when it comes to AI. I am the biggest advocate for AI. So I'm not here to kind of tell you beware of the dangers. But I am here to kind of say that, we do have concerns, and these concerns are when we start automation and we start decision making at scale through AI capabilities, utilized in credit scoring and education and policing and mental health, then we really have big questions that we need to ask around the data, around how technologies are being used. And one wonderful example was actually Black Lives Matter. They did a fantastic job of really pushing big tech to make a U-turn on facial recognition technology. And this was probably one of the only moments where such a massive wave of pressure knocked on the doors of the big tech companies to say, facial recognition technology contains, could harm large sections of the population, and it's just completely unacceptable to do that. And IBM was the first actually to do a U-turn in terms of surveillance and facial recognition technology. So that's important, and brands are going to face that much more, and the tech companies are going to face that much more. Is the people are starting to become aware, the people are starting to become more educated, and the people are going to start demanding changes. This is why I think brands can't afford to be vanilla. I don't know why I put can't twice on this slide. Maybe it's to kind of emphasize to you that they definitely cannot be vanilla. This is a really lovely example from Nike a few years ago, and kind of related to the Black Lives Matter thing. Is this American football player called Colin Kaepernick, and he was the first person to start kneeling down when the American anthem was being played in football games, against what we now know about, the knee used by police against Black communities in America. We know exactly what that symbol actually means. But what was really interesting in what Nike did is Nike actually took Colin Kaepernick as a poster boy for Nike, and that completely polarized the Nike customer base. So you had people who really stood for the values of Colin Kaepernick, and they were like, oh, amazing, okay, yeah, we love Nike double as much now. And then you have the people on the other side who are like, no, and they were burning Nike trainers out in the streets and doing all kinds of stuff. So it's really important to note that because of this move, the share price of Nike actually went up by 5%. So this is why I'm saying the value of values is values do have value. And this was one instance where this was demonstrated. And there are many instances. And I hope that, more of these cases will surface. And I know a lot of people have criticism about Nike, and sometimes, this might be perceived as being whitewashing. But in itself, it's extremely powerful. When brands are not vanilla, when brands stand for something, what could they actually achieve? There's an amazing professor at Edinburgh University called Professor Eva Luger. And once I asked her a question, I'm like, why are ethics so popular nowadays? Why is everybody talking about ethics? I mean, it's such a strange subject to be a popular topic. And she's like, that's because regulation tells you what you can and what you can't do, but ethics tells you what you should and you shouldn't do. And the scale of technology and the development of technology that we are experiencing at the moment leaves a lot of room for ethics to guide and help us in knowing what we should be doing and how we should be behaving until the regulators catch up. And so it's important. Regulation is extremely important, and it's something that we need to keep pushing for to allow for these changes, much like the Black Lives Matter movement. But lobbying around creating more regulation is really important. And it's really important as well to hold organizations to account where there are violations, where there are clear violations, in terms of customer privacy. And but most of all, I want to focus a little bit on people. I think we talk a lot about data and we talk a lot about tech, but people are not really that celebrated. And we need to celebrate people, because really at the heart of all of this is people, and when early on in the Value of Data campaign, people would ask me, by the way, how, where is the value of data? How could we really leverage the value of data? And it was very clear to me from the start, the value of data is actually in the people. If I gave two exactly identical data sets to two groups of people, they're going to come up with different insights. They're going to come up with different actions. They're going to be able to action the insights in a completely different way. So actually, my value is in the people. So we need to kind of bring that back. But also the interesting thing is that people have to have a responsibility, and especially in this area of bias and data bias and unwanted bias and unconscious bias, we have biases that we are completely unaware of. And there's a lovely game, by the way, that I encourage you to play. This is the link to the game. It's called Moral Machine. It's created by MIT. And basically, it's a set of experiments where it says there's a bunch of people in the car and there's a bunch of people on the street, crossing the street. The profile of these people differs. So you've got people who, might be overweight, or people who might be old, or people who are doctors, or people who are young. And they just mix these groups around between the people crossing on the street and the people in the car. And the car is going to crash. It's either going to crash into the bollard, or it's going to crash into the people. So you get to choose. I know it's very morbid, but you get to choose who dies effectively. But what's really interesting is at the end of that, you get a report that says these are your biases. And I was shocked when I did it, because I didn't know I had some of these biases. And especially when you look at people working with data on a day-to-day basis, it's really important to reflect on these things, because there is a responsibility, a massive responsibility on you and who you are and what you believe and what you think. And then we go into this idea of teams and the diversity of teams and how important it is. I was having a chat with a friend in London who has a company, and was telling me how it's great how in London he doesn't have to make much effort, but he has such a diverse workforce. And I kind of took a bit of offense about that, because that's a privileged position. A company in London being able to have a diverse team is just by virtue of you being in London. But if you move into other areas of the UK, for example, you have to make an effort for you to have a diverse team. And so in that regard, I think that it's very important to create and to have policy in place that allows you to really create a diverse team, because it's important not to have teams of one color and to have teams who are of different backgrounds, who have different skill sets, who come from different industries, who come from different countries, because that diversity and that richness is going to pay back massively. And I'm just going to do a small plug. It's about a program called the Value of Data's Democratization of Talent program, and you could read about it on the DMA website. And that talks specifically about how could we start tapping into different people in the community who are neurodiverse, or their mothers returning to work, that we're not leveraging the talent, but it's really important that we focus on talent. And as much weight as I'm going to put on the people who are at the bottom, is we need to put that same pressure on the people who are on the top. So we need to think about our leaders, and we need to think about who our leaders are and what values do they represent. I'm a child of the 90s. This man, I used to be a basketball player, and this man used to be my hero. And I watched the Netflix show, The Last Dance. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but it's really good. And it's really eye-opening to see what kind of a leader Michael Jordan was. And really his values could be summed up in one sentence: is he just wanted to win. And that's all he cared about. So it's really important to understand what kind of what drives your leaders, and what are they thinking about. But also, it's really important to understand that in the context of the culture of the organization. So the man who's in the back in this photo is Phil Jackson, who's the coach of the Chicago Bulls, who went on to win 6 championships in the 90s. And it's really important because even though Michael Jordan's leadership was, he was leading from the front, but Phil Jackson had the whole culture in his hands. So he set the tone for the rest of the team and how the team would interact with each other and how the team would kind of pull together to be able to deliver onto clearly articulated strategy and plan. And here again, like when you talk about data and you talk about strategy, it's very important that all of the actions that we take and all of the data that we collect and how we use it has to be driven from strategy. It can't just be we're collecting data for the sake of collecting data. And this is where the real bad practice starts happening. Also, another question is, who owns values in an organization? So, is it CISO? Is it the CDO? Is it the CMO? Who is the custodian of values? We know that there's a department sometimes called CSR that does good things in the organization. But how does that line up? What are the values of the organization? How does it permeate across each and every single department? So finally, once you do all of that kind of soul searching, which is upfront, as you come to this bit, is, are you really set up for success? So I've talked enough about people, but do you have the right technology? Do you have the right data? All of this stuff that I'm not going to preach to you about because I'm sure you've heard a million times, but you do have to set yourself up. But all of these things that I talked about, without really having a clear idea what your values are and what you really stand for, no matter what data you get your hands on or no matter what tech you buy, you're not going to be able to deliver it to your customers in the way that you think you want to deliver to your customers. So finally, the value of data program, again, I encourage you to go onto the value of data section on the DMA website. We've got tons of white papers, loads of really interesting things. We are very open to talking to brands about how we could help move them on the values journey to become more values-driven organizations and really leverage this notion of the value of values. So if you want to talk to us, then please reach out to me or to the contact details on the DMA website, and we'll get back to you. And that's it for me.
For us, thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
I really enjoy about these conferences the fact that you never actually know where the conversation is going to go. I want to ask you here that I did not sit down here this morning thinking we're going to end up talking about this. I heard the other day on a podcast the extreme right-wing neocon broadcaster Rush Limbaugh died last week. We don't think all people are weak. We don't think help. That's a socialist approach, etc. We just want to allow them to reach their own potential. But I was listening to it thinking, actually, that presupposes that there are no barriers. There's no racism. There's no sexism. There's no ageism. And unless there's an acceptance of that, how do you go about balancing it?
Well, I mean, I think, when you talk about unwanted bias, for example, and we talk about it strictly from a data point of view, what the definition of unwanted bias is it's you're putting one condition over another condition unfairly, or you're putting one group against another group unfairly. So if you take a look at, for example, unwanted bias in data in the policing system in New York. And there's a wonderful book, by the way, by a lady called Kathy O'Neill called Weapons of Mass Destruction, which I really recommend the audience to read. And it shows how historic data on how the police force was utilized in New York, heavily geared towards Black neighborhoods. Actually using that data to inform future strategy becomes really damaging, because you're taking a historical problem unchecked and you're kind of propelling that into the future. So this is why it becomes really important to kind of really unpick this data and really unpick to be able to tackle them. And this is why I speak about the role of the individual. And again, I don't want to load the individual up too much to say it's all the individual's fault. I mean, you know, everyone in this chain has a role to play, but I think it has to start at the level of the individual to consider, what am I doing to disadvantage somebody else? If you're doing an interview, or you're working with a piece of data, or you're having a conversation with colleagues in a room, all of these situations could disadvantage colleagues and could disadvantage groups. So it's very important that we keep ourselves in check on all of these things. I don't know if I answered your question, but I totally agree with your sentiment.
No, I think you have. It is basically a question of having sort of 360-degree vision on it, and constantly re-evaluating, constantly questioning what your own position is, because it's going to have to start with there. Question here: do you envisage consumer trust and the relationship with organizations improving in years to come, or going in the opposite direction?
I would hope improving. I would hope that by customers actually understanding their rights and understanding what it is that they want and what it is that they're asking for from companies, is that customers will be able to shape what these organizations become like, because it's simply not going to be acceptable. I mean, it's fine if you have Mr. Ford making one car and he's the only car manufacturer, but if you've got thousands of Mr. Ford and people could buy electric vehicles, or, you know, it's like there are so many choices where you could align your values, and you could align your value decisions as well, to say, you know, I could make several choices and informed choices. And so we're going to see a shift, I think, in terms of how brands deal with that. Because if you take a look at it historically, brands have always enjoyed staying on the fence. Is we don't want to make too much of a political statement, or we don't want to make too much of a social statement, or we don't want to, you know, we don't want to overexpose ourselves. But actually, this exposure could be massively beneficial.
You quoted the incidents or the incident where, you know, Nike got behind the Black Lives Matter movement, and you said, you know, their share value went down 5%. That, I would imagine, was a short-term response.
Went up.
If you were to ask them, you know, was it the right thing to do, how would they respond?
I think they would respond it was the right thing to do, because the loyal customers to Nike became more loyal. But Nike were very clear that these are the values that we stand for in society. And yes, it might be perceived as a political stance, but they were standing against injustices against the community. You know, it's not a political position. It's what kind of society do we want to live in? And brands need to focus more on that aspect, because we don't operate in isolation. And we could see through the COVID pandemic right now is we really are not isolated. I mean, no matter how isolated we think we are, and the way we the way we consume and the way we produce and all of these things actually are quite fundamental to the societies we have created and the societies we'll create in the future.
You've got a fantastic job title, Head of Decisioning.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't know what it means, by the way, so I hope you're not going to ask me a question about it.
But, you know, if you'd been sitting in a boardroom 10 years ago, talking in the way you're talking now, I would imagine a lot of people would have been rolling their eyes. How about nowadays? I mean, are they genuinely buying into it, or are they just seeing, well, there is commercial advantage here?
I think there's a lot of lip service which is happening right now, which is a bit frustrating, really. I mean, you see one set of behaviors or one set of words about values and whatever, and then you see the exact opposite of that. And this is why the change has to be much more fundamental than that, because and brands will be sussed out. I mean, you know, you've got for example, Glassdoor that tells you, you know, what employees think about an organization internally. If customers get wind of some of the practices that happen in some organizations, then that's going to affect that customer decision. So it's very important that it's not just about us looking good. It's about us being, or trying to be, the best that we can be, really, you know? And I think that organizations who try to just appear on the surface that they're all about diversity and they really care about LGBTQ plus communities and all of this stuff, are going to be sussed out really quickly, and customers are just going to flock away from them.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you. Faraz, it's been a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
That's Faraz Kanesa, Head of Decisioning Standard Life Aberdeen, Chair of DMA Scotland. We're going to break for lunch now. It's going to be a 90-minute break for lunch. Final session B will start at 2 o'clock this afternoon. Take the time, if you can, to visit the exhibition hall, the virtual exhibition hall during the breaks. See the solutions that some of our vendors have on offer. And if you can, just support our sponsors. As we said right at the beginning of today, these events can only happen because of the sponsors. So, if you can support them in any shape or form, that's the right thing to do. And obviously, don't forget to enter the prize draws, because somebody's got to win those earbuds. I'm Mark Stephen. Thank you for your attention.